Let's get through the rigmarole first before we get into the Miami Dolphins podcast. Remember, guys, this podcast posts each and every single Wednesday. The first segment of this show, we go through all the Miami Dolphins news you need to know about. The second segment of this show, we go through all the AFC East news you need to know about. The third segment of the show, we highlight all the players you need to know about on game day. And the fourth and final segment of the show, we go through the Miami Dolphins fan Q&A. So this first story, Dolphins looked at Michael Kendricks before they looked at Kiko Alonso for the trade. This article is by Sam Robinson of Pro Football Rumors. When the Dolphins and Eagles discussed the seminal trade that ended up giving Miami Kiko Alonso and Byron Maxwell, and the Eagles the number 8 pick in the 2016 draft, Philadelphia Brass gave the South Florida franchise a list of players they were willing to offer. Michael Kendricks appeared on that list. Armando Salguero of the Miami Herald reports the Dolphins preferred Alonso to Kendricks and ended up making sure the former Bills standout only played one season with the Eagles. While the Dolphins signed Alonso to an extension, Kendricks hovered on the 2017 trade block. Salguero reports the Dolphins studied Kendricks, Salguero reports the Dolphins studied Kendricks, who is a full-time player for the Chip Kelly era. Eagles before being relegated to a part-timer under new DC Jim Schwartz. Kendricks said in July he requested a trade out of Philly, but his 2017 salary cap became guaranteed earlier this year. Dolphins executive VP Mike Tannenbaum also received reinsurance on Maxwell, who did not show much with the Eagles from Dan Quinn. Maxwell's DC for part of his years in Seattle, the rangy corner became the player the Dolphins prioritized in his deal. One that helped the Eagles move from 13 to number 8, putting them in better position to make the Carson Wentz trade with the Browns. But the team wanted more, per Salguero, promoting Miami to scan Philadelphia's linebacker depth chart. The Dolphins preferred Alonso to Kendricks because of the appeal as a three-down linebacker, Salguero notes. Kendricks is signed through the 2019 season but sits behind Jordan Hicks and Nigel Bradham in Philly's linebacker hierarchy. Hicks and Bradham function as the Eagles' nickelbackers. Kendricks is attached to the cap numbers of $6 million in 2017, $7 million in 2018, and $8.6 million in 2019. Alonso's extension ended up being for nearly the exact same amount as the Eagles signed Kendricks to more than 18 months earlier. The Miami Dolphins outside linebacker signed a 4-year, $28.9 million re-up more than a year after Kendricks signed a four-year, $29 million deal. So that's a whole lot to get right there. Obviously, in hindsight, and obviously now that Kiko Alonso's only been a Fin for one season, it ended up being the right decision. The Dolphins were obviously in need of some serious linebacker help, so it was a great trade. Obviously, we were criticized for it at the time because of the injury history to Kiko Alonso. He had a full healthy season, relatively healthy season. Before the end of the season, obviously injured his wrist, but he was great all year for us. He was one of the reasons we made the playoffs. He made big plays in big games. Obviously, the pick six against the Chargers is going to go down in Miami Dolphins history as just one of those great Dolphins plays. So, Kiko Alonso ended up being the right decision. I'm glad we made that trade. It helped us get to the playoffs. Obviously, Byron Maxwell started off slow, finished really strong, and Kiko Alonso was great for us. So, I'm glad that we didn't get Michael Kendricks, that's for sure. So, the Dolphins made the right move. But it's a very interesting story of how one other false move, you could have been down a totally different path. This next story is concerning Craig Urbick and his chances of making the season opener. There is a good chance that Craig Urbick won't be able to play in the Dolphins opener, as he deals with a knee issue, Adam Beasley of the Miami Herald writes. That's problematic for Miami since Urbick was supposed to start in place of injured left guard Ted Larson. So that's all we have at this point. He had a knee scope. There's a good chance he might miss the season, or not the season, but miss the season opener, which would not be good. It looks like Jesse Davis is going to start the opener against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Jesse has had some good moments in preseason, and he's had some really bad moments in preseason. So hopefully we see an improved player against the Eagles, because their front seven is legit. I mean, when you have Derek Barnett, and then obviously Fletcher Cox pushing pressure up the middle, it's really, 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 really hard to do anything against that defensive line, especially on 3rd and long. So it's going to be interesting to see what he does against a front seven that's one of the more elite in the league. So Jesse Davis is somebody you definitely got to keep your eyes on for Thursday's game. And don't get me wrong, Jesse's had his moments this preseason. There's been a couple times where he's pulled for a block and he looked really good and athletic in open space and powerful when he hit the block. But there's been other plays where he's been overpowered. Obviously, he gave up a sack in the Baltimore Ravens game. That was pretty bad. He did not play all that well against the Ravens, but he's had some good moments, had some bad moments. Adam Gase has a lot of confidence in him. He's been impressed with the improvement he's made, and he thinks he can be a starter. So we'll see. Hopefully, we see improvement from him in the game against the Eagles. Alright guys, that's all the Miami Dolphins news you need to know about. Let's move on to the AFC East news you need to know about. This first news story I'm sure everybody and their mom has heard about, so we're not going to spend too much time on it. But wide receiver Anquan Boldin has retired from the NFL and has retired from the Buffalo Bills. Obviously the Buffalo Bills are super receiver needy. They lost Marquise Goodwin, they lost Robert Woods, they lost Sammy Watkins. They basically lost their entire receiver core. And you think, obviously that's a huge hit to Tyrod Taylor and the chemistry down there that they had in Buffalo. Obviously, all of those guys were longtime Bills. And one of the things I really wanted to see in preseason that I was anxious to see is how is Sean McDermott going to use Tyrod Taylor? Because I thought Rex Ryan, I thought he did a good job coaching that football team, and I thought he did a great job and his coaching staff did a great job of setting the offense around Tyrod Taylor. It was basically old school wishbone offense with everybody's basically a running back. Tyrod Taylor and obviously with the speed options, the triple option, all those crazy formations that they lined up in, almost every single down they lined up in the pistol formation. Rarely did Tyrod Taylor line up under center unless it was for play action purposes. So it's really interesting to see how they're going to use their quarterback. Because I thought the coaching staff that Rex Ryan put together did a great job of utilizing Tyrod Taylor's strengths to the best of their abilities. And I think Tyrod Taylor's timing as a quarterback is not very good. I don't think he's the greatest pocket passer in the world. So if you try to make him more of a traditional type of quarterback and you don't tailor the offense to him, I think he's going to struggle. And so far, they haven't done any of that stuff that Rex Ryan did. So again, in preseason as an offensive coordinator, you don't want to tip your hat yet, tip your hand. So we'll see when regular season comes around. But something as Dolphins fans that you guys need to keep your eye on, because they really I'm not saying that he was a part of a system, but they really tailored that offense around Tyrod Taylor. Tyrod Taylor had the number one rushing attack last season, and the Buffalo Bills overall did. And that's not just Shady McCoy. That was Tyrod Taylor. That was Mike Gillislee. But they also lost Mike Gillislee in free agency. So they lost a lot of pieces down there in Buffalo, and they have a new coaching staff there. So it's going to be very interesting to see how they use their quarterback, Tyrod Taylor. This next news story, the Bills are not shopping LeSean McCoy. So the Bills were rumored that they were shopping around Shady McCoy, which would make sense because it looks to me and everybody else that they're rebuilding the football team from the ground up. And this article is by Dallas Robinson from Pro Football Rumors. The Bills are not shopping running back LeSean McCoy and have no intention of doing so, sources tell Mike Florio of Pro Football Talk. Once it's a face, a McCoy trade could make sense for Buffalo club that looks to be on the verge of a rebuild, if it isn't already there. The Bills, of course, dealt wide receiver Sammy Watkins and cornerback Ronald Darby earlier this month, and while general manager Brandon Bain received veterans in those deals, Jordan Matthews and E.J. Gaines, the clear implication behind the moves was draft capital. Buffalo picked up a 2018 second-round pick in the Watkins trade and a 2018 third-round pick in the Darby swap. McCoy then doesn't particularly fit in with the Bills' current direction, especially given his age. He turns 29 in July. And his salary signed through 2019. McCoy is currently the league's second highest paid running back on a multi-year deal, trailing only Devontae Freeman. If McCoy was traded, Buffalo would pick up $6 million in 27 cap space, with $2 million and $5 million in dead money occurring to the team salary cap in 2018 and 2019, respectively. Clearing cap space wouldn't be the primary goal in a McCoy deal. However, instead the Bills would be aiming to acquire some sort of draft compensation for a still productive running back. Last season, McCoy appeared in 15 games and topped 1,000 rushing yards for the 5th time in his career, while scoring 13 times on the ground. He also added 50 receptions, his highest total since 2013, for 356 yards and 1 more score. The Bills don't have an exercise amount of depth behind at the running back behind McCoy. Through the 2016 fifth-round pick selection, Jonathan Williams would likely become the primary beneficiary of a McCoy trade. Veterans Mike Tolbert, Joe Barnard, and Tywan Jones are also on the Buffalo Bills roster, but no one has experience at the running back position. So obviously, very interesting stuff, because we do know the Bills are, it seems they're stocking up on draft picks, and to be honest, they've done a great job of doing that. Obviously, this past draft, they traded down with the Chiefs. They got an extra first-round pick, so they have a ton of draft picks this upcoming draft, and they've done a good job of that. And it looks like they're going all in for the future. It would not surprise me if Shady McCoy was not a Bill after this season. If they're willing to get rid of Sammy Watkins, who is a young stud receiver, then they're willing to get rid of a 29-year-old running back for more draft compensation. It just makes sense at this point. Let's move on. This next report is on the Jets quarterback situation, and this report comes from Roy Parks of Pro Football Rumors. It has been assumed for some time that Josh McCown would at least open the 2017 season as the Jets' starting quarterback, but the team needs to give Christian Hackenberg a look this year in order to see what they have in him. And to do so, and to that end, Hackenberg got a surprise start in last night's preseason matchup against the Lions. It did not go well. Hackenberg took a big step backward from a solid outing last week, going 2 for 6 for 14 yards. He was sacked twice, he fumbled once, and 4 of his first 5 drives were 3 and outs. Although head coach Todd Bowles attempted to take some of the heat off of Hackenberg by pointing out that the offensive line did not give him much of a chance, Brian Clesto of the New York Post believes McCown won the team's starting job last night, and he didn't even have to take a snap to do it. Now for more from, okay, so that was it. So there you go. It's still a mess. The Jets quarterback situation is still a mess. I don't know why Bryce Petty's not getting more looks. The man actually took snaps last year in regular season games and actually won the Jets a game against the 49ers. Granted, the 49ers not a powerhouse, but they're still, that's still an NFL football team. So interesting that Bryce Petty's just been thrown in a garbage can. So that's weird. So we can't talk about the Patriots, but the Patriots are talked about enough. So we're not going to talk about the Patriots. What's the next? Okay, so next segment, we're going to we're highlighting all the people you need to know about on game day, which is tomorrow for the game against the Philadelphia Eagles, which should be a very fun game for many reasons. If you don't know, Adam Gase plans to play the starters through at least the entire first half, so you're going to see a whole lot of Jay Cutler, which is awesome. So that should excite any Dolphins fan, and they should have one drive coming out of the half. And I want to see more Matt Moore. Let's start there. I want to see more of Matt Moore. He only got, I want to say, 2 drives maybe last game, and I think that's not enough. I just want to see what Matt Moore can do at this point in time. Now, granted, he's not with the ones, but he's coming off the best stretch of his career inside this Adam Gase offense, so it would be nice to see more of Matt Moore, and that's just a little nitpick. I just want to see more of Matt Moore and see how he's progressed in this offense. But obviously, the player that all eyes are going to be on for Thursday's game, and obviously was the headliner for me last week, is still the headliner for me this week, is Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler had a tremendous practice yesterday in Tuesday's practice. He had a tremendous practice, throwing for 6 touchdowns and only 1 interception. And most of those touchdowns were in 11-on-11 drills, which is where you want to see all that production come from. And he was throwing deep to Kenny Stills. Since he's been practicing with the Eagles, he's been building this rapport with Kenny. He's made a lot of huge plays, not just Tuesday's practice, but also in Monday's practice. So him and Kenny are getting a rapport. Juice Landry and him are getting a rapport. And the number one thing I think that I really was happy about and surprised about, not surprised, but really happy about was Julius Thomas and Jay Cutler hooked up for a touchdown, and so did Anthony Fasano and Jay Cutler on a back shoulder fade in the end zone for a touchdown. So it's nice to see the tight ends getting on the same page as Jay Cutler, because that took a long time to do. So hopefully we see more of Anthony Fasano. I know Dolphins fans are excited to see him back in a Dolphins uniform, so we definitely want to see him make plays. Super excited, obviously, to see Julius Thomas and where he's at with Jay Cutler, as I just talked about. In practice, they finally really got a rapport going. Obviously, him throwing 2 touchdowns to tight ends, so that's pretty awesome. So Jay Cutler is definitely the headliner for me this week. That is the number one guy you guys have to keep your eye on, obviously. I know it's the obvious one, but Jay Cutler, he's the starting quarterback for the 2017 season, so I expect him. And another thing I really want to see from him is his command of the huddle. Not just for a couple drives against the Baltimore Ravens, but for an entire half, and then one drive coming out of half into the second half. I want to see that no-huddle offense. I really want to see that no-huddle offense more, because it looked really fluid in the game against the Baltimore Ravens. So not only do we need to watch Jay Cutler, but we need to see how it commands the huddle. What is the pace that we play out with Jay Cutler? Obviously, Jay Cutler knows this system like the back of his hand. That's what Adam Gase said in his post-game press, or not his post-game, his press conference that he held after practice, saying the reason that they went no huddle is because Jay Cutler has great familiarity with the offense, so they're able to do that. And his command of the huddle, like I said, it was fluid. It's the best no huddle offense we've seen since Adam Gase has been a Dolphin. And people forget that a big part of Adams' offense obviously comes from Peyton Manning, and a big part of Adams' offense is what the Colts used to do throughout the 2000s and into the 2010s was no huddle with Dallas Clark and Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne. That's what they did. So that's something that he was trying to bring to Miami, and it didn't work out, obviously. We slowed the game down because of the playbook limitations that we had, because it was the first year and everybody was learning it. Now that everybody knows it, obviously they're getting used to a new quarterback. I really want to see more of the no-huddle offense, because we have the talent. Our talent level is so high that if we run the no-huddle offense at a high level, that just elevates our offense even more, wearing down defenses. So, especially with J.J. in the backfield, that only helps things. So that's going to be interesting to see how Jay Cutler commands the huddle. Very excited to see that. Another thing I'm very excited to see is the offensive line. For the first 2 games of preseason, they have looked. In the Falcons game, they didn't look bad. I think if you were to do an overall grade for them in the first game, I would say it was okay. That's what I said in the Falcons. My thoughts after the game was I thought it was okay. You didn't really see dominant run blocking. You didn't see. I'm not going to say dominant pass blocking, because there was a lot of penalties and a lot of holding calls, but they did a really good job in pass protection in terms of just not allowing sacks, because they didn't allow 1 sack the entire night against the Falcons. Against the Ravens, that was a totally different story. The offensive line really looked like it took a step back. The good thing about this is we're getting most of our starters back in this game. On the offensive line, Juwan James is going to play. Mike Pouncey is going to play. Obviously, Laramie is going to be out there. Javon Bushrod's going to be out there. The only starter we're not going to have out there is obviously at left guard. Neither Ted Larson or Craig Urbick is going to play. I'm assuming it's going to be Jesse Davis again. So it's going to be Jesse Davis. So the offensive line, again, to recap, we got Juwan James, and Laramie at the tackle positions. And then inside, we have Mike coming back, which is awesome. Jermon's, he's been the model of consistency on that offensive line, and Jesse Davis a guard. So I think it's going to be fun to see the no-huddle offense with most of the starters on the football field. That's going to be extremely exciting, because we have yet to see that this preseason, is those offensive linemen be together. And obviously, when they're together, they're super, super talented and one of the best ones in the league, especially at the tackle. I don't think there's a better tackle combo in the NFL. Not even the Dallas Cowboys have that. They obviously have Lyle Collins and Tyron Smith. Juwan James, we have Juwan James and Laramie Tunsil, who are both true tackles. And I don't think anybody has a combination like that in the NFL. Maybe the Titans do with Tyler Lewan and Jake Conklin, but that would be the only one that I could say that could be better. Because those 2 tackles are Juwan James, he's looked amazing. He's been way more consistent. You saw that last year, the end of last year too, as well, as Juwan James just looked a whole lot better. So it's fine. It's good to see him finally blossom in his development. So again, really, that's another thing that I think all Dolphins fans should be excited to watch, is that offensive line finally finally, for the first time this preseason, we're going to see that offensive line play together for the most part. Obviously, the left guard position is vacant as of right now. And in terms of other things, the chemistry thing always goes with Jay Cutler. Want to see Juice make more plays. He's been very, very silent. Jarvis Landry, but it's somebody definitely we're going to have to highlight. Jarvis Landry has been silent throughout preseason. The most silent I've ever seen him throughout preseason. I think the only catches he's had was off of screens the last 2 preseason games, and obviously you know how I feel about how the Dolphins execute screens. It's pretty poor. So I definitely want to see Juice Landry, and I'm sure we're going to see a lot of him since he's going to play an entire half. So I'm sure we're going to see a lot of him there. And obviously Kenny Stills and all the other offensive players. That's an obvious one. We talked about that. So on defense, I definitely want to see us get after the quarterback. I definitely want to see Charles Harris is somebody definitely we're going to have to watch. But I'm going to start with Cameron Wake. Because Cameron Wake apparently is having probably his best offseason he's ever had. Adam Gase has been gushing about him, how he's better against the run and all that other stuff that he has had to work on throughout his career, which is just setting the edge and being more active in the running game, and he's looked amazing at that so far this offseason. Adam said he looks like a 25-year-old out there running around, and obviously if there is one ageless wonder in the NFL, it's Cameron Wake. So I want to see what Cameron Wake can do against a really good Philadelphia Eagles offensive line, who Ndamukong Suh said could be one of the best in the league. So I really want to see what Cam Wake can do against whoever is going to be blocking him, whether it's Lane Johnson or Jason Peters. It's going to be very, very interesting. But they do have one of the better offensive lines in the league. So I want to see what our front seven can do against that offensive line, and especially what Charles Harris can do against that offensive line. Ever since we started the joint practices, Charles Harris, I'm not going to say struggled, but he hasn't been dominating his matchup like he usually does. So I want to see Charles Harris get his first not first NFL sack, but his first preseason sack of the year. I definitely want to see Charles Harris do that. He's been getting pressures, and on pass rushing downs, he's been amazing. But obviously on running downs, that's something he needs to work on, setting the edge. Engaging in his blocks, not sitting there watching the play. That's something Adam Gase has said about Charles Harris that he needs to learn. Even though the play we might be running it up the middle, you still need to be involved in the play. That's just the NFL. So I said, that's what Charles Harris needs to work on. And I'm sure we're going to see more of that, but definitely want to see more of Charles Harris this against the Philadelphia Eagles offensive line that is pretty talented. So as we go down the line here. This one's pretty obvious. It's DeMaurice Stringfellow. DeMaurice Stringfellow has played amazing throughout preseason, and it sucks that David Fells had a pretty crappy game last week because he was open. There was a play action. I can't remember what yard line we were on, but we had the right look on defense. Adam Gase caught him, and I think it was a man blitz, and we had one-on-one with DeMaurice Stringfellow, and he beat his guy pretty bad, and David Fells overthrew him. But I think DeMaurice Stringfellow, even though he didn't make a lot of catches in the game against the Ravens, I think he had one for like 10 yards. He was open on tape. Like, he was getting open. It's just the quarterback wasn't making the throws. So DeMaurice Stringfellow has been amazing throughout preseason so far. Definitely want to see more of him against the Philadelphia Eagles secondary that has, doesn't have they don't have the greatest corners in the world. Obviously, that's the big reason that they traded for Ronald Darby. So definitely want to see him dominate the Eagles' secondary depth. I definitely want to see him have another big game. And if he has another big game, I mean, my God, I think he's definitely a lock. If he has another big game tonight, I think he's a lock for the roster. And then obviously we want to see the middle linebacker position. That's a huge question mark. Mike Hole, a lot of people gave him grief for last week's game. I don't understand it people are like just describing it like he looked like awful. He did not look that, in my opinion, he didn't look that bad. He had like 3 pass deflections, and obviously the Ravens attacked him on a couple downs with Danny Woodhead coming out of the backfield, and he did a tremendous job of picking his man up. When he was with the ones, I thought he looked solid. I didn't think he looked special or anything, but obviously when you went with some of the second string, third string players, he looked a little worse. We don't need him to carry a team. Our talent around him can carry him if need be, for God's sakes. I thought that's what they did when he was out there with the one. So I want to see Mike Hall continue to be solid, and definitely want to see him do better against the run. That's something that Mike Hall has got to work on. Is his in between? I mean, we might as well start Neville Hewitt in the middle linebacker position, to be honest with you, because they struggle. They both struggle with the same thing. They're not physical enough in between the tackles. They get blocked way too easily in between the tackles. They get lost on that offensive line all the time. They just get swallowed up. And that's why our run defense has been so poor with those guys starting, is because of that. So I don't know if we're going to see improvement from Mike Cole in that area, because I think at this point he is what he is, but definitely want to keep an eye on Mike Cole. And as for other players, Cordrea Tankersley, definitely want to see him have another great. I think if he has another great performance like he did last week, then he's got the job. It's hard for me to imagine. It's hard for me to imagine somebody else taking his job from him. Or taking that third cornerback outside spot. I see a lot of people say Alteron Werner. Dude, he's taking so many snaps at the slot corner position. I don't think that's happening. Plus, Cordrea, I think he knows the system better at this point. Obviously, he went through OTAs with the team, and Werner did not. So I think Cordrea is going to win it if he has another performance like he did in last week's game. I mean, the man looked amazing in last week's game. So if he has another performance like that, I definitely would expect a Cordrea. So he's another player you guys have to look at previewing Thursday's game. Two more guys. Definitely want to see more of Thomas Durante, who showed up in practice in the joint practices a couple times. Definitely want to see him continue to make plays in the preseason, because I still think he has a lot of potential to be like a sub package, sub in, sub out, matchup in zone type of a tight end. The place where he fails is blocking. He's just not a good blocking tight end. But he's such a good receiving threat that I think he's such a good asset to have on offense in terms of, hey, we're on the 50-yard line. We ran the football a couple times. They're struggling to stop our running game. Let's take a shot on the 50. Let's hard play action, which Adam Gase is so good at designing play actions. Every time I see Adam Gase call a play action, it's beautiful to watch because of how he blocks them and how it's set up. It's hard not to say, hey, Thomas Durante, go out there on the 50-yard line and let's take a deep sluggo route or a deep give and go route to Thomas Durante up the seam, because he's a big dude, great hands, and he's probably the smoothest route runner other than Anthony Fasano on the football team. And maybe Julius Thomas, but he is such a great route runner. So I want to see more of Thomas Durante. Obviously, want to see more of Drew Morgan because of such a good camp that he's had. He has struggled throughout. I'm not gonna say struggled throughout, and some of it's not his fault because of the quarterbacks. The quarterbacks have played terrible throughout preseason, in my opinion. I think their timing is so bad with the other receivers. When your timing is that bad in a quick passing game, obviously it's going to affect everybody else around you, because timing is everything in a quick passing game. You have to get the ball out on time. If you're not doing that, the ball is going to be either inaccurate, or the DB, it's going to be tight coverage, or they don't have a lot of room to run. So your timing has to be pinpoint to be successful in a quick passing game. And the third, fourth string, Brandon Dowdy, David Phillips, have not been able to do that. So not really going to blame Drew Morgan. Definitely want to see him get some more work with the ones, maybe, to see maybe if that timing speeds up a little bit. Want to see him throw some screens, because I think he is shifty in the open field. We've seen some of that in preseason, but definitely want to see Drew Morgan make some more plays in the red zone and just in general. Definitely want to continue to see Jakeem Grant make plays. He's had a pretty good preseason, a better preseason than I think I thought he was going to have early on, at least. And I definitely want to see Leonte Carroo continue to make plays. He was basically, and again, some of this sucks to talk about, because if the quarterbacks didn't have such a bad game against the Ravens, who knows? But want to see some more plays by Leonte Carroo. For sure. Obviously, catching that touchdown of the Falcons game, got off to the right foot. Definitely nice to see him make plays that we expected him to make coming into the NFL. So all of those guys are going to be very, very interesting to watch. And obviously Devon Gottschall, I almost forgot about him, who's had a tremendous offseason, impressing everybody. It's really funny because Adam Gase won't outright call him the starter because obviously Adam Gase competition is everything to Adam Gase, and you don't want to pigeonhole someone somewhere already. Devon Gotcha, though, in my opinion, I mean, he basically his press conference he basically said Devon Gotcha was going to be the starter. So unless he loses it to Jordan Phillips, which isn't going to happen. But he's had a tremendous offseason. I cannot wait to see what he does against the Eagles with the ones again, man. Like, Devon is so versatile, which is so awesome, that he's so good against the pass, which I thought that's probably the best thing he did coming out of college, and he's shown that he can be a very, very good run stuffer. So, it's going to be really fun to watch him play with the ones on game day. So, those are all the players you guys needed to know about. We got to get into the fan Q&A. We're never going to get the fan Q&A done. All right, let me get my rookie rankings in really, really quick. Definitely want to hear your guys' rookie rankings down in the comment section below. My number 1 rookie right now is Devon Godchaux. My number 2 is Charles Harris. And my number 3 is Cordrea Tankersley, who's moved up, I think, a spot because of his game against the Ravens. Because that might change after the Eagles game. Who knows who has a great game and who doesn't. So before we get into questions, because obviously we want to get into this quick, don't want to drag on too long, I want to answer some grievances you guys have had in the last straight up fan Q&A video I did. And this question comes from Ronald. Don't want to spend too much time on this. He says, 2 weeks in a row you haven't used any of my questions, and some of the questions you're using have already been asked and answered several times. He's not the only one. The Republic Finn, he said, same. Jacob B, he says, you never use mine too. Ronald says, he says in response to this, he says he doesn't listen to every video, every question, I'm guessing he meant. In the last 2 weeks, he hasn't mentioned my questions, and some of the ones he has already answered and answered several times, like, is Godchaux going to start? Well, yeah, because he's been taking all first-team reps a week before the Falcons preseason game. Okay, so Ronald, I apologize if I did not get your questions in, and I apologize to the Republic Fan and Jacob B. If I didn't get your questions in the fan Q&A, I'm sorry, but I know for a fact that I answered your questions in the podcast. So, because maybe not Jacob B or the Republic Fan, but I know that I think I answered Ronald's. If I didn't, I'm sorry. I could be wrong, but I honestly, if you don't watch the podcast, let me know, Ronald. If you don't, if you're not hearing this, and if somebody else is hearing this in the community, can you please ask Ronald if he watches the podcast? Because I do answer everybody's questions in this segment of the show, in this fan Q&A segment. I had to get that out of the way before we get into the Miami Dolphins fan Q&A. All right, so let's answer the first question. This question comes from Brandon. He says, Desmond Bryant was released by the Browns. Do you think we should go for him from a depth standpoint? No, I think there's a couple other players I want to see when we get down to final roster cuts. So I think we should wait just a little bit longer on that one. Brandon says, down goes Urbic, who is still available, or do you trust our talent? Down goes Urbic, who is still available, or do you trust our talent? I don't think, I mean, depending on how long he's going to miss, obviously is going to be the concern there. If he's only going to miss one game, I'm not too concerned about it. It's the left guard position. Thank God it's not a tackle position or something like that. But going into Gerald McCoy, that might be a problem because they move him around so much. But I'm not super worried about it. I'm pretty confident. I would say I'm okay with who we have now, especially if we need to put Anthony Cena guard. Gamerific, he says, do you let's see here. Excuse me, that wasn't a question. This question comes from This is Patrick. He said, should we start Ray at linebacker, or would it be like having two Timmons on the field at a time? I say we start Hull. No, I think we need to start either Lawrence or Kiko in the middle, and then put Lawrence or Kiko on the outside, and then put Neville Hewitt on the outside. He's had a really good offseason. He's dealt with some injuries. That's why we haven't been able to see him play in preseason games. But he needs to start, because if I would rather have those three on the field than Mike Hull, Lawrence Timmons, and Kiko Alonso on the field. That would be my lineup if I was controlling the team. No, this is Patrick. Miami's wide receivers keep showing significant flashes of greatness. Is this bad news for Landry? Uh, Obviously, people are worried about, since we have such tremendous receiver depth. Is that maybe the Dolphins would be less they would be okay with letting Juice Landry go in free agency. Is it a worry? Yes, because obviously as Dolphins fans, we've went through stuff like this before and we've gotten burned. Obviously, Drew Brees, Charles Clay, most recently Olivier Vernon. We've let go in-house talent, Wes Welker, many times throughout our history. Rob Ninkovich, and yeah, so Dolphins fans have a reason to be worried about it because we've dealt with it so many times. But I don't think Jarvis Landry should be concerned. I don't think it's bad news I don't think it's bad news. No, I think Jarvis Landry's too talented not to pay him. No, this is Patrick. Says Cordrea Tinsley showed some flashes of a starting cornerback against Baltimore. Should he take Tony Lippett's spot for the year or keep him in the cornerback rotation with Vernon? I think I answered this in the fan Q&A. I think he should take Tony's spot. The Gamer12345 says, do you think Ajayi will become the next Adrian Peterson? No, they're very different. Jay is more... Jay, to kind of... he reminds me a lot of... he's a power back. He reminds me a lot with speed, because he has really... I think he's faster than Marshawn Lynch ever was. I think he's a lot quick. I think he's a little bit more explosive than Marshawn Lynch. I'm serious when I say that. I think he's more of like an Eddie George-esque, just because of how hard and physical he plays. And Eddie George had, he had so much explosiveness with his power. So he reminds me a lot. I think that's probably the closest comparison. Let's see here. This question comes from this is Patrick. He says, on a scale of 1 out of 10, how good did Jay Cutler do in the preseason game? It was such limited. I don't think you can grade it. This question comes from 0930. He says, do you think Landry's production will decrease this season with the likely? I think I answered this to fan Q&A. With the likely emergence of Parker, it seems that Parker will be Cutler's favorite target, and if this happens, does this leave the door open for the fence to letting Landry walk? No, I don't think so. I don't know why he hasn't got a contract extension. And I'm sick of people telling everybody to calm down, because I think it's valid to the fans to be worried as of right now. They should be worried. Until he gets a contract in his hands and he signs it, you should be worried. I think it's stupid when you hear some of these people like, oh, just wait, there's 2 weeks until the season starts. Yeah, you said that when there was a month before the season starts, and now it's 2 weeks away, and it doesn't look like a deal is anywhere near close to being done. So there definitely is warranted to be worried about it, and I'm still worried about it, to be honest with you, because as of right now, it's a 50-50 chance. Who knows what's going to happen? But I don't think it has anything to do with Devontae Parker. I don't think it has anything to do with the decision. I hope not. Stabdog says, will Jordan Phillips get cut? No. I don't think he'll ever get cut. I think you need as much depth as you possibly can. And Jordan Phillips, he's just not a consistent player to be a starter. That doesn't mean he can't come in on a goal line package or something like that and give his all. Excuse me. He just can't give 100% on all 3 downs. Stabdog says, does having Alteron Werner help to game plan against Tampa Bay? It might. Obviously, he knows Jameis Winston's tendencies, so yeah, it might. And he knows the playbook. Antoine Jackson says, how are we going to use a linebacker now that we signed Ray Maluga? I answered that in the fan Q&A. Doggy Dog 100 says, do you think Jay Cutler can play lights out with all the talent he's got around him? Yeah, I answered that in the fan Q&A, but that's a short answer to your question. Doggy Dog X100 says, do you think Ray can fit in with the rest of the linebacker lineup, and how do they fit in together? People act like Ray's going to play a lot of snaps. Ray's not going to play that much, guys. I think he's... I would be surprised if he plays more than... I don't think he's going to play as much as people think he is. I wouldn't expect to see a ton of him. Hopefully Matt Burke utilizes him well, and subs him in, subs him out at the right times, because that's very important when we're talking about Ray, because he's such a such a problem in terms of pass coverage. Dwight Keller-Williams says, what would your 53-man roster after seeing the first half of the preseason? What would be your 53-man? I mean, I can't go through the entire thing, but there are some players that have disappointed me so far. I've been disappointed in. Not disappointed is a harsh word to use, but I need to see more of Drew Morgan. Very disappointed because of the strong offseason. Again, not all of his fault. In terms of other players that I'm disappointed in, definitely disappointed in Sam Young, because he was coming off of the reason the Dolphins kept him around is because he had such a good performance against the 49ers. He had a slower performance against the 49ers, but it was an okay enough performance to say, okay, this guy can be pretty good depth at the tackle position. And I thought he had a great performance against the Rams. So, definitely disappointed in Sam Young. Dwight Keller-Williams says, how do you think VT is going to fit in with the Dolphins? VT. Vincent Taylor. I don't know what you're talking about. VT Vincent Taylor. I think he's gonna fit in really, really well, especially on. I can't wait to see what he can do on. He's such a big dude, but for such a big dude, he's got great explosion. So it's gonna be fun to watch him rush the passer as well. Dwight Keller-Williams says Tom Brady is a system quarterback. It's more of a statement than a question. I don't know. I don't think we'll ever know. Unless Bill Belichick retires before he does. Dwight Keller-Williams says, do you think that Adam Gase's Dolphins are going to be a sustainable franchise for decades to come? Yes, because of the culture he's built. I think Adam built the culture before he did anything else, and he's built a tremendous one. So yeah. Dwight Keller-Williams says, do the Dolphins have just enough to make it over Do the Dolphins have just enough to make it over the playoff hump? We made it over last year, Dwight. We made it to the playoffs last year. Dwight Keller-Williams says, do you think that Color is going to have a career year? I think he's got a good chance to. Back to the playoff question about that. I think, again, we're definitely more talented than a wild card team, but I don't make predictions. Alec Jeffrey says, how do you think our depth at receiver will play out? Better yet, who do you want to keep and why? I definitely want to keep Demore Stringfellow. I think the sheer athleticism that he possesses with that route running ability and his hands, some of the hand fighting things that you see, that's like veteran stuff. And he looks like a deep threat, a legitimate deep threat. So I think the Dolphins, if there was one receiver to keep around, I think he's the number one priority for sure. Brandon says, do you think Deion Lacey will make the roster? I am really high on his talent. When you get to watch his Canadian League highlights, I don't know. Deion Lacey had a pretty bad game against the Ravens. He's super athletic. He's not physical enough in between the tackles. It's almost like he's almost a Neville Hewitt clone, but he's less physical. So, I don't know. I don't know if the Dolphins will keep him on the 53-man roster. Brandon says, but obviously we need as many linebackers as we can. Brandon says, think we should sign a center for the fact that Pouncey is honestly a ticking time bomb. How do you feel about his health? I think you're not going to get anybody else signed, realistically. I think the Dolphins are pretty comfortable with who they have behind him in Anthony Steen. And I think Mike Pouncey is going to be fine. I think he's going to be fine. Brandon says, our D-line looks really good down to our linebackers. Can our D-line be as serious as Denver's? Well, to be honest with you, I think Denver's is less talented than ours. I think not only do we have Sue in the middle, they don't have a Sue. They lost Malik Jackson, and it's been very hard for them to replace him. But our edge rushers, Von Miller is great, but Shane Ray, he's an unproven commodity. And I think Wake and Branch, for the season that they're coming off of, and I think Charles Harris, I think we have more depth and just overall more. It's hard to say more talent, but I'm going to say this: I think we have overall more depth than the Broncos do. Brandon says, what are the chances we sign an offensive lineman before the season starts? I think pretty slim to none, but who knows? Brandon says, do you think Aaron Rodgers kind of has the same attitude that Jay Cutler has? It's just he has been more successful with, which is why people discard it. I think what you're referring to is how players really don't get along with Aaron Rodgers, and I know this is this again, we don't know this for a fact, but this is just stuff that you hear, that players just don't necessarily, they don't hang out after games. They're not in social scenarios. I don't think, they're just not. They sound like Brett Favre, basically. So I see what you're saying there in that comparison. Yeah, I would say just because Aaron Rodgers is who he is, he definitely gets more slack on the rope for that kind of stuff. Because, I mean, hey, if it's working for him, and if it's not working for you, then people obviously want to pick you apart and then pick out what's wrong with you, and then, crap and put a spotlight on that and then focus on that for, 10 years. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying. I think that's actually a pretty good comparison. This next question comes from Brandon. He says, if the Bills release Reggie Ragland, do you think we pick him up off waivers? If we did, I think he would be a steal in terms of talent and depth. Yeah, I think so too. Brandon says, do you, I don't think they'll cut him though, because I think you definitely can still get something for him. Brandon says, did you get to see Vincent Taylor? I think he can definitely be a good backup for either Godshall or Sue. How do you feel about Vincent? He to me is an old school DT. I like Vincent a lot. For a big dude, again, he can move. I think he can definitely be a good backup for many years to come. Brandon says, do you think Rey Maualuga is going to help our defense? Yes. In obvious running situations, yes. Brandon says, Xavier Howard has shown signs in the past 2 weeks pushing a receiver out of bounds in week 1, running the receiver's route for him Thursday. How long do you think it's going to be until he unseats Byron? He's already unseated Byron. I don't think Byron's checking the best guy. I think Xavier's going to check the best guy. Because I think the Dolphins organization has shown a lot of confidence in Xavier, and I think he's going to be the number 1 corner. I think he actually is on the depth chart. So, Brandon says, because we are practicing against Philly, our corners should get better playing that receiver core for a week, right? Alshon Torrey Smith, I think they got a little worse when they got rid of Jordan Matthews, excuse me. But yeah, they should definitely get some good reps in. Brandon says, I like our depth at corner, but I feel like we are 1 injury away from signing Revis. Do you agree? I don't know about that. Brandon says, what if Cutler uses Devontae Parker like he did Alshon Jeffrey? What does that mean for our offense in terms of ball distribution? I don't think he's gonna. I don't think he's never had people underestimate slot receivers. He's never had a slot receiver like Juice Landry. So slot receivers can make it really easy on a quarterback for especially when Juice brings to the table as a slot receiver. How he can turn a 5-yard gain into a 98-yard touchdown. Cody says, well, with the signing of Rey Maualuga, do you think it's an upgrade or a downgrade from Raekwon? I think it's a downgrade. Brandon says, even though we had to get blown out, I think our D got some good reps. Do you think our rookies will really contribute on Sundays? Yes. Our ones dominated their ones pretty bad. So they couldn't score on our defense. Now, granted, Joe Flacco wasn't starting, but excuse me. I'm very confident that he would have probably would have been the same result. I think our ones did a really good job, especially on defense. I thought they did a tremendous job. Cody says, let's see here. Steven says, if you had to pick one to keep, who would it be, Jarvis or Devontae? That's such a hard one. Probably keep Juice because he's the more proven commodities move. He's the more proven, more consistent player at this point, but we'll see after this season. I think Devontae Parker is going to go off. The Gamer 12345 says, do you think Kaepernick deserves to be signed by someone? Yes, I think he does, but that's up to an owner and their coaching staff and regime. Ronald says, who do you think won the left guard spot with Ted Larson out? It hasn't been won yet, but it looks like Jesse Davis and Craig Urbick. It looks like Jesse Davis is going to be the guy. The Gamer12345 says, what position do you want us to draft next year? I don't know. The Gamer12345 says, what do you think of signing Rey Maualuga? I thought it was a necessary thing. Stefan, can he still Jarvis Landry, Devontae Parker? Okay, I answered that one. Thank you, Nate. Jay the Boss 14, he says, how do you feel with all the injuries we've had? Adam Gase should consider lowering the intensity. Should he consider lowering the intensity in practice? No. But most of those injuries were, I think every single one of them was non-contact injury, except I think all of them were, actually. Except Jay's, the concussion, obviously. Chris Prez says, where do you rank our offense and defense coming into the season? I don't know. That's a tough one. I'm not. See, again, I don't like predicting things. It's a weird thing of mine. Let's move on from that. McKeel Hansen says, how do you think Jay Cutler will do this? I think we're going to be pretty good, though, Chris. I think we're going to be pretty high. McKeel Hansen says, do you think Jay Cutler will do this year, and how will you predict his stats? Don't predict things. Zach says, do you think if Jay Cutler has a good year, Tannehill's time could come to an end? Depending on your definition of a good year, I think he would have to have an insane year. I think he would have to win comeback player of the year. He would have to bring us to the playoffs, and he would have to win a playoff game for that to even be considered. SoFlo Sports says, what games are you most worried / excited for? I'm not worried about any game because I'm pretty confident in the talent level that we have. Now that the Buffalo Bills have literally torn down their team, and it looks like they're going to continue to do that, building for the future. The Bills games are still very, very important. I think those two games at the end of the season are very important. But the Patriots games at the end of the season in November and December are obviously playoff implications written all over them. So those games, I think, are the ones I'm most excited for. Man Gamer says, is Jay Cutler going to be injured after the first... Is Jay Cutler going to be injured after the first 8 games of the season? Is Jay Cutler going to be injured after the first 8 games of the season? No, he's not going to... He's fine. Man Gamer says, how many years do you think it's... Okay, how do you think it's going to take us to get to the Super Bowl and win it? I don't know. I don't like to particularly predict things. All right, I'm sure... Oh, okay, Ronald. This question comes from Ronald. I think I answered it. Ronald says, who do you think won the left guard spot with Ted Larson now? I think it should be Jesse Davis. I think that is all the questions for this week. Alright, so that has been your Miami Dolphins podcast for this week. Before we get out of here, I want to apologize to Jacob B., Ronald, and the Republic Finn. Remember, guys, if you're not getting your questions in, to ask it multiple times. Sometimes I'm not seeing the same things you are, and the more you ask it, the more likely I am to see it. So I apologize for that. And anybody else's questions I continue to miss, I apologize. But make sure you ask multiple questions so there's a better chance for me to see it. If you don't watch the podcast, I'm sorry. If you watch the podcast, please let these guys know. Maybe notice Patrick or David. Let them know that I did answer their questions in the podcast. Remember, guys, this podcast posts each and every single Wednesday. We run through all the Dolphins news you need to know about, all the AFC East news you need to know about. We headline all the Dolphins you need to know about before game day. And we go through the Miami Dolphins fan Q&A. If you like Dolphins content, please go check out the channel and subscribe. Hopefully I won't let you down in that area. And I am Skax1383, and I will see you guys in the next one.